Okay, so let's, before we continue, let's just have a recap of what we've previously covered. So JFK arrived in Dallas. I just looked at a video the other day. It said 11:37. I think that's what I thought as well. He spent some time at Love Field, just shaking hands, waving, and so on. I'm not sure how long he was there for. Jay, do you have any idea how long he was at Love Field?
I don't know exactly, but it wasn't very long.
Right.
Basically, it was just he literally got off the plane, and much to the Secret Service entourage, whatever's displeasure, Jackie went right up to the crowd behind the barrier and were shaking hands and basically security nightmare.
Yeah.
And he did that against advice and protocol and everything else. So he did all that. They made their way to the limousine, whatever, and then off they went.
Did they give us? He didn't give a speech, did he? Did he give a speech at Love Field? No. Okay, so because the other thing that I'm a bit confused about is, so he just spent a short time at Love Field, and then I read somewhere that it only took 10 minutes to get to Dealey Plaza, but he didn't arrive there until 12:30. So that can't be right.
No, I don't. No, I've often questioned that myself, and like I said to you, it's like one of those we need to go there to sort it out, to you know, find out how long it takes and all the rest of it. But no, I don't think it's only 10 minutes.
Yeah. So anyway, they
went
left
somewhere else first, didn't they? They went somewhere else first. They went to somewhere where they had a sit down thing, and some guy presented him with a Texas Stetson, and then they went on to.
No, I don't think that's right. No, I'm sure they went directly from Love Field to Dealey Plaza. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure they drove directly from Love Field to Dealey Plaza. You think they stopped off somewhere and he got a Stetson?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, he got presented with a Texas Stetson, and I've seen the footage of it. Basically, where was it they went to? I need to find out. They went on straight from Love Field. They went to this other place where they were being. It was like some sort of kind of civic reception. He goes in. The governor of Texas, I think it was the governor of Texas, presents him with this Stetson. They tried to make him wear it, and he refused to put it on, but he made some kind of jokey quip about blah blah blah, and then he made some comment about, you know, they only want to see Jackie in a hat and not him in a hat. And Jackie's there; she's in the pink outfit. So yeah, that is definitely what happened. Definitely. They definitely went somewhere else. I need to find out where it was, though.
All right. Yeah, we need to check that out then. Okay. Anyway, whether or not that's right, they then went on to Dealey Plaza and arrived there officially at 12:30, although I've also seen 12:29. So, and as we pointed out before, 12:30, if it was 12:30, sounds like a very militarily precise time, which we discussed before. So and at 12:30 he was shot. How many times is up for discussion, but he was shot, and I think was killed in Dealey Plaza. And then the limousine sped off to Parkland Hospital. So I think we discussed before how long that would have taken. Again, we haven't been there, so it'd be good to go there to check out how long it would take.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, back at Dealey Plaza. So of course, ordinarily, if there'd been a murder, the crime scene would be taped off. But at the crime scene, there was kind of there were kind of two crime scenes, weren't there? In effect, the moving one, i.e. the car, and then where the car had been at the time of the fatal shots. So the one murder scene is being taken to Parkland, and the other one, of course, is in situ at Dealey Plaza. But the normal procedures that you would expect for crime scene investigation were just completely absent. So there was a big melee, and people were rushing to the picket fence. Then there was stuff going on in the Texas School Book Depository. So we discussed that, where a lot of people went over to the picket fence, they looked around the rail yard, and then they were the police were diverted to the Texas School Book Depository. At this point, we don't have any suspects. We also discussed the evidence, where some people said they thought there had been shots from behind the fence. Some said there'd been shots from the direction of the depository. And at 1 o'clock at Parkland, JFK was declared dead. So that's where we've arrived at. So so we looked at the evidence. Next, you'd think you'd be able to get on with taking the evidence back to the lab and following up leads and all that, and just concentrating on the JFK murder. But it wasn't as simple as that. So what's about to happen over the next 2 days almost defies belief, really. I mean, if some guy was writing a novel about it, they'd say, oh, that's a bit far-fetched. I mean, so it's difficult to pinpoint the exact time, because again, there's been blurring of the lines, but within the next 15 to 20 minutes, the death of a police officer is going to be tied in with the JFK assassination. So Officer Tippit Jace was murdered. What time he was murdered, as I said, is disputed. But do you think that was in the plans of whoever arranged the JFK murder? Was it part of the plan, or was it something had gone awry? What do you reckon?
Well, for me, the whole Tippit murder is probably the murkiest aspect of the whole thing. For me, I've never really been able to kind of get my head around it. It's like, if you think about, obviously we talked about in the past, we've talked about Lee Harvey Oswald, and let's just say, for playing devil's advocate, let's just say, it was him, right? I personally don't believe it was him in the sense of what everybody is meant to believe. But anyway, playing devil's advocate, if you're Lee Harvey Oswald and you've just shot the President of the United States, what's your MO then for your next movements? I don't think, and this is again just me, if I was in that situation, I don't think I would be then wanting to go and rush off to a movie theatre and then get into any kind of conflict with anyone along the way, to be honest, let alone a police officer, and then shoot a police officer. I don't, that's got to be the last thing on anyone's mind in that situation, I would have thought. But who knows how you'd react in that kind of situation? I don't know. But if
you think it was planned, do you think it was pre-planned, or is it something that just happens? It's kind of thing.
I think I think the whole thing. I think the whole thing was kind of pre-planned, and again, I wouldn't be at all surprised if Tippit was a genuine police officer on the beat, doing his own whatever, and then the same people, for want of a better phrase, behind the actual assassination are the same people behind the taking out conveniently of a police officer to endorse the framing up of this guy.
Yeah. So let's just forget Oswald for the moment, because at this point on the timeline, we still don't know anything about him, but he's about to be introduced. But up until this point, we don't know about Oswald. So,
were there any witnesses to the Tippit shooting?
Yeah, there were.
And who were the witnesses?
There was a lady called Helen Markham, and then was there a motor mechanic with a Latin name? I can't remember his name. Yeah,
Was he Cuban by any chance?
I'm not sure, but I think there were two brothers, and when they gave evidence initially, they were among the large number who were intimidated, and the one guy he just escaped death. Basically, he got a bullet in the head, but he didn't die. But after he got the bullet in the head, he changed his testimony.
One of the witnesses.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
I can't remember his name. So so there were witnesses. So, and again, like similar to the JFK murder, the normal protocols weren't followed. So anyway, he was murdered after 1 o'clock. Tippit was murdered after. Well, it seems pretty certain that he was murdered after 1 o'clock. But then there's a dispute about how long after 1 o'clock it was. Some say it was nearer to 1 o'clock. Some say it was nearer to 1:15.
1:16 was the first report that he'd been shot.
Well, possibly, but I think you'll find that some people will dispute that as well. So,
like everything in this case.
Yeah, but as I said, with the JFK murder, again, the normal protocols weren't followed. So again, you got to point the finger at the Dallas police and ask why weren't those protocols followed?
Just on a point of interest, if the first report, which is the official line, that the first report was 1:16, that Tippit had been shot, right? What did Lee Harvey Oswald do between 1:16 and 1:51, which is when he was arrested in the theatre?
Yeah, well, yeah. A lot of people, that timeline is very important, because
totally.
If certain things that happen at certain moments, then it makes it very difficult to fit everything in on the Oswald timeline. So this is why this is a very important part of the investigation. Well, I think they're all obviously important, but like you were saying, this is kind of the foggiest part of it. And if it's the foggiest part, then you've got to wonder if it's possibly the pivotal part, the Rosetta Stone, possibly. So, but the thing about it is that always bugs me is I'm trying to think of some other examples. I mean, in America, of course, we're not Americans, and so we don't watch so much American news. But for example, I remember in England in the, was it 79? I think it's 79. It could have been in the 80s, but I think it was 79. The Tottenham riots. Was it the Tottenham riots in that 79? And there was
first Tottenham riot.
yeah. So and there was a police officer killed. His name was Keith Blakelock. I'm pretty sure his name was Keith Blakelock.
Yeah.
And okay, admittedly, this is British news, but and I was living in Ireland at the time, but you know, we still could see British news and so on. So and like it was like headline news on national news, and his picture would be on at the beginning. Everywhere you would on if you read the newspaper, you would see his picture there.
Yeah, I remember.
I wasn't in Dallas in 1963, but just reading all about the JFK assassination, one of the things that strikes me is, and you can compare it with JFK, who of course was the president, somebody who's known all around the world, but Lee Harvey Oswald wasn't somebody who was known all around the world. He is now, but he wasn't at that point. But again, his face was splashed all over the media coverage. But what about Tippit's image? You have to delve for it. And then they come up with one or two. And I've always wondered why. What? It's almost like they don't want you to see his image. I've always thought that.
Did he even exist?
Well, no, I think he existed, but you know, because some people have said he was a spitting image of JFK. I've seen his image. I think there are similarities, and apparently he was called Kennedy. Again, I don't know whether that's true or not, but apparently his nickname was JFK or something in the Dallas Police Department. And if you look at him, I mean, there are similarities. I mean, I could just, even my poor facial recognition powers would be able to distinguish them, I think. But there were similarities. So that's what I've always wondered about that. Why have they been so hesitant to splash his image all over the screens like they have done with other people who've, you know,
the only thing I can think of is it would be a shift of focus away from Oswald, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
that's the thing. They wanted everybody to focus on Oswald.
Well, I mean, you know, I think you have to.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I'm not saying it was true, but I think you have to consider that they didn't want you to see his face. So
one thing that's always puzzled me, though, right? Obviously, you know, Oswald Sosay left the book depository on foot.
Yeah,
made his way towards wherever this theatre was.
Yeah,
and also before that, you know, half an hour before, you know, Tippit was shot.
Yeah.
So the distance between the book depository and the point of where Tippit was murdered, right?
Yeah.
What is that distance, and how long would it take to walk from the depository to that point?
Yeah.
Right. And, you know, we're talking, for argument's sake, let's say, you know, say Tippit was shot at 1:16 for argument's sake, right? Or there or thereabouts, right? So if he was shot around that time, the president was shot at 12:30. So you're looking at a 45-minute window.
Yeah.
Why is somebody who has just shot, or Sosay just shot the president of the United States, why are they then walking 45 minutes to a point, right?
Yeah, but I don't think he could have walked it. He had to get transport I
All
don't.
right.
I don't.
Was he seen on public transport?
Well, that's the thing. Some people say he got on a bus, and some people say he got. Roger Craig said he saw him running down the bank to get into that Rambler. I think somebody else said he might have got a taxi. But on foot, I think it. I'm not sure. It might not have been mathematically impossible, but it would have been difficult to have made it on foot. So
All right.
it seems
All right.
he did
so-
get around by some form of transport. And also,
All right,
not
so-
forgetting that his landlady said he went home, but
Did he?
yeah, well, that's the
What did he
thing.
say?
I mean, I
What
think
did he
his
say?
landlady, I'm not sure, but I think his landlady sort of disappeared after. So his landlady disappeared, I think, in the days following the assassination. So
So then, what was the distance? What was the distance between the point where Tippit was shot and the theatre where he was arrested?
yeah, I think it was a mile or two. Yeah.
So if he walked that, let's just say he walked that, that would account for some of the half-hour difference between, well, just I say half hour, 40 minutes between Tippit getting shot and him getting arrested. So even bearing that in mind, all right, what kind of intelligence were the Dallas police working on to suddenly, in 40 minutes, decide that whoever shot Tippit is in that theatre and they're going to arrest him? In any given situation of homicide, even when it's a cop,
Yeah,
you do not get 30 or 40 police officers plus FBI plus bloody Secret Service descending on a theatre for the shooting of a police officer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's almost like they'd already made their mind up, or already knew that the person that they were going to be arrested in that theatre was the person they were going to be, accusing the assassination on. Right. So all of that for me doesn't make sense in the slightest.
Yeah.
Also, why was he hell bent on getting to that destination? Right.
Yeah.
It's almost like it was, if you didn't know better, you'd say somebody had said to him, right, after the president's been shot, you need to be at this point. We will collect you and we will take you to safety. This is your rendezvous point.
He's not trying to escape. He's obviously there. Somebody's told him to be there to meet.
Yeah, exactly.
So
right from the start, he always denied any knowledge of. He obviously been told he'd been arrested for shooting the police officer, but nobody had said to him, "You've been arrested for the assassination or the shooting of Jack Kennedy." Right? Nobody had said that, and he maintained that in the short space of time that he was alive. Following that, he maintained that right the way through, that nobody had ever accused him or officially charged him with the assassination of the president.
Well, I think years later, Jesse Curry came out and said he wrote a book about it. I think, was it the Assassination Diary or something? I can't remember what it was called, at the end of the 60s. And he said in the book, they never had any evidence to tag Oswald. No. They never had any evidence. So,
no. And when you consider that all he had been arrested for was the shooting of Tippit with Tippit's own gun, right? So it's not as though Oswald was even carrying a weapon, right? So that's all they had to arrest him on in terms of factual evidence, or whatever, any kind of evidence. They then take him back to the Dallas police headquarters and march him through with a guy behind holding the bloody rifle that they found in the bloody book depository.
Yeah.
What the hell?
Yeah. So, but the thing is, without the Tippit murder, do you think would they have got Oswald? I mean, without that murder, would they have had an excuse to get
Left him, no?
Oswald? It seems to me that Tippit murder was
Green light.
the justification they needed.
It was green light. That's what it was.
Yeah, so they needed that murder to tie him in. But to me, that's just like a big shoehorning in. I mean, this is the thing. How did they know to look for Oswald? Apparently, the guy in the shoe shop. But again, with this lot, you don't know if they made it up, what they're making up, what's true, what was made up retrospectively to fit in with the narrative. I mean, they're just making things up. So you have the official evidence, but is that really a true reflection of what went on? I'm very skeptical that it is. So I think in this new Oliver Stone, JFK Revisited, I think it was a Jim DiEugenio tweet. I think he said that Roy Truly was the guy that tipped off the police about Lee Harvey Oswald. So Roy Truly was his supervisor in the book depository. But so on what basis would he have tipped the police off about Oswald? I mean, that he'd been up on the 6th floor and thought he might have been the guy taking the shots?
Well, my own personal belief is that Jack Ruby was more involved and was behind a lot more of it than just getting rid of Oswald, to be honest. That's my own personal feeling. I think Ruby was the agent for the mafia, and I think he was acting under instruction and was kind of like the linchpin in the whole thing. That's what I think personally, and I even suspect myself that it was Jack Ruby that fired the fatal shot into JFK, personally, because I'm pretty sure that Jack Ruby was on that grassy knoll. But we'll never know.
Well, I mean, with everything else he was up to, I wouldn't be surprised, but I haven't heard that one before, to be honest. But it seems to me that the Tippit murder they needed something to be able. It's almost like desperate. I mean, anybody with any thorough investigation, I think, would laugh at it. But
yeah, what was the reason for Tippit approaching Oswald in the first place?
Well, was it Oswald in the first place anyway? I don't think it was Oswald.
Sorry, approaching the suspect then.
Yeah, approaching somebody. So
what was the motive? What was the reason?
We don't know. I mean, it's just
what was the person unknown doing that was so bloody suspicious that Tippit goes and wants to challenge him anyway, to the point of drawing his gun. I know they do that a lot in America anyway, but to the point of drawing his gun only to have his gun knocked from him. And well, it wasn't knocked from him, was it? He turned his hand and made him shoot himself, more or less. But yeah. So what was all that about? I mean, to me, it just reeks of a professional hit.
Yeah. Well, I don't know whether it's professional or not, but how did they tie this to Oswald? I mean,
exactly.
It seems that it's so. Firstly, you got the Kennedy murder, and then you've got the Tippit murder, and then finding him. It seems to me that finding him in the theater is the coup de grace. But just because he's in the theater, how does that tie him to first the Tippit murder and then to the Kennedy murder? I mean, what?
Well, there were no prints. There were no prints on Tippit's gun, other than Tippit's, right? So that's the first thing. You'd be saying, right, why aren't there any prints other than Tippit's prints on the gun that say fatally wounded Tippit, right? I've read somewhere, I can't remember where, but I read somewhere that the debunk for that is that they were saying that the murderer of Tippit, brackets Oswald, was wearing gloves, right? When he was arrested at the theatre, he didn't have any gloves on him or around him or nearby. There were no gloves. There were no gloves found between the Tippit scene and the theatre, not even discarded, dropped, whatever, nothing.
Yeah.
So that's a load of shit for a start. There's just so many, like you say, so many amateurish investigations that were just like given lip service and never looked into very deeply at all.
Well, I think, just like the scene in Dealey Plaza, I don't think the scene was secured. Witnesses, I'm not sure they were separated. The usual stuff, a lot of it was just disregarded. And I think I read that the body was removed in no time at all, whereas normally it should remain there until they've done everything that they need to. But the body was gone in no time. I mean,
let me just go through the timeline a little bit. This is according to Wikipedia. So let's have a look at this. So at 1:33, that's when they announced at Parkland that Kennedy was dead, right? At 1:33.
1:33. I thought it was 1 o'clock. No.
Well, that's when they announced 1:33. Well, according to Wikipedia. White House Assistant Press Secretary Malcolm Kilduff announces that Kennedy is dead at 1:33 p.m. All right.
Yeah.
At 1:38, Walter Cronkite reports that President Kennedy is dead and that Johnson will be sworn in as the 36th president. Right. That's at 1:38. At 1:40, Robert Kennedy is telephoned by Johnson to express his condolences, and Johnson asked Robert Kennedy where he should take the oath of office. Right, at 1:50, Johnson then telephoned his friend Irving Goldberg, who's an attorney, and the two decide to ask Sarah Hughes from Dallas to administer the oath. At 1:51, Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested at the theatre. At 2:10, Abraham Zapruder arrived at WFAA TV in Dallas and is interviewed about his film. At 2:13, which is 3 minutes later, police find the weapon used to kill the president on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. And at 2:38 p.m., Johnson is sworn in as president by federal judge Sarah Hughes on Air Force One. And we know at that point, at 2:38, Jack Kennedy's body was also on the plane at the time.
Well, we think it was.
Oh yeah, but yeah, the official line is that it was, because we've seen the coffin being taken on and Johnson following it, etc., etc. And at 2:46, Air Force One departed Love Field for Washington. So between when they announced his death, which was 1:33, and 2:46 when Air Force One departed, that's less than 2 hours. That's less than bloody 2 hours, mate. That is less than 2 hours.
Yeah, this is the death
for them to stitch the body back together after the half-assed autopsy, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there was no autopsy in that. There was no autopsy in that.
No, I know, but you know what I mean. Obviously, they would have to at least made it presentable, right?
Yeah, clean it up.
Yeah, clean it up. So in less than 2 hours, this is like bloody changing rooms where they build a house in in a day. Rubbish, right? So in less than 2 hours, they have to first of all decide that he's dead.
Yeah.
They then got to clean up the body and then put it into a casket. Then at some point swap the casket.
Yeah.
They did, right? They also in that time need to clean up the limousine and all that kind of stuff, put the bubble back on the roof. Then they have to get the body and the casket to Love Field. So how long does that take, right? How long does that take? Probably 20 minutes, half an hour, I don't know, right? So that, that's reducing your window down even further. They've then got to do all that adjustment they needed to do on Air Force One, which was like a half-assed bloody DIY job, so that they could actually fit the coffin through the bloody door and into the, rather than putting it in the payload, because Jackie didn't want him in the cargo hold. She wanted him on the plane, right? So they have to like do all that. I know that kind of thing doesn't take 5 minutes, right? But apparently you got like 3 or 4 big burly, SS Secret Service people bloody taking the door frame off an aircraft so that it can fit the coffin through, get it all nice and secure and all that kind of stuff. And then they do the swearing in, all of that ceremony, right? Which, it was a fairly quick process, but they got to do all of that and then take off within 2 hours. Who are they trying to kid?
Yeah.
Who are they trying to kid? Seriously. But because there's photographic, documentation of it, that's what happened. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah, but what about the Tippit thing though? I mean, so forgetting that for a moment. So going back to
what I'm saying is, in that 2 hour window, all of this Tippit thing and the Oswald arrest is happening in that 2 hour window.
Yeah. That's what I was trying to get at the beginning. Was what happened with Tippit? What did it have a couple of? Was it pre-planned or just something that happened and unanticipated? And or if it was pre-planned, what were the reasons for that? Was it to tie Oswald in, and or was it a distraction from what was going on with the body back at Parkland and on the way to Love Field? What part did the Tippit murder play in all this? Do you think it could have been used to distract or take away resources from?
100%. Yeah, 100%. 100%. I mean, like I've said to you before. I mean, I don't really know the distance between Dealey Plaza and the whole Tippit scenario. I don't really know, but I would have thought that every available resource, police officer and what have you, would have been on their way or heading towards Dealey Plaza within minutes of the premier of the USA being assassinated on your bloody doorstep, right?
And suddenly,
you're not going to be Bobby on the beat who's listening to his bloody radio thinking, "Oh, I'm just going to hang around here because there might be somebody a bit dodgy around here." You're not. You're going to be heading off towards Dealey Plaza, doing everything you possibly can do. Surely. Yeah. I mean, it makes no sense to me whatsoever.
Yeah. So this Tippit thing, I think it was a pivotal thing, but I can't make up my mind whether it was part of the plan or they were something had gone awry. And do you think? I mean, because at the time Tippit was murdered, I'm not sure there was the APB for Oswald. I'm not sure it was already out. I think, was it the guy in the shoe shop that brought Oswald into it, or was it the description that was put out on the police radio about what the Tippit murderer looked like?
Yeah, well, that would have been it, surely.
So but was it a truthful description of the guy that had committed the murder, or was it somebody just setting him up?
Well, obviously, I mean, obviously, it's a setup, isn't it? It's a setup. It's an absolute setup royally from day one.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, and I've never said that, Oswald wasn't, partially guilty by association.
Yeah.
I've never said that. You know, the guy was a wrong un because
Yeah.
of all the stuff that he was involved with. I mean, he wasn't, you know, Mr. Squeaky Clean,
No.
etc., etc.
No.
But I don't think he was particularly bright either, and I think he was just, you know, completely and utterly set up from day one of the whole plan, which was probably about 2 or 3 years before when Cuba was, you know.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So I think this is something, the evidence and what the witnesses say they saw is something we'll have to come back to. We can probably do in a supplement, but I think there are big doubts about the bullet evidence, like you were referring to, also the witness testimonies. As I said, I can't remember his name now, but one of the guys that witnessed it, when he said what he saw, he suddenly got a bullet through the head and subsequently changed his testimony. So that was
that reminds me of a certain bodyguard in a certain car who was the only one wearing a seatbelt that all of a sudden gets a memory loss. But anyway, that does remind me of that a little bit. Yeah. Also, drawing comparisons on what I was just saying about, you know, resources going to a central point. If you compare it to 9/11, right?
Yeah.
Literally every single available resource, like all the police departments in New York, yeah, and beyond, headed to there. All of the fire resources, yeah, all of the ambulance crews, all of the Port Authority police, everybody that was anybody and any kind of law enforcement headed for that direction. Yeah. They weren't hanging around saying, "Oh, you know, what else? Who else can we get?"
Yeah. So
it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Just on the witnesses and so on. I mean, I think there are big doubts again, just like the JFK evidence. Big doubts about the bullet evidence, witness testimonies. So I think some of the testimonies, the IDs, the descriptions of the suspects are different. They don't relate to Oswald, and you've got to also bring in the timeline. Would he have been able to get there if he'd been at this place or that place? But I think also there was a church nearby, and I think the police chased some suspects into that church, and then it just dies a death, that lead. So, and then suddenly next thing you find is that Oswald's, somebody's saying some guy's acting suspiciously at the theatre, and suddenly, like you say, all the police are there.
Yeah, loads.
Yeah, why would he go to that theatre? He must have been told to meet somebody there, and some people say that there was somebody else there and they let him out the back and all this kind of thing.
He was also alleged to have said, "This is it."
Well, that's, again, this is, you know, with these police officers, you got to take it with a pinch of salt. It could have been true, but in my opinion, it's very possible that they were just telling more porkies. I think these guys are just habitual liars, in my opinion.
Yeah, true. Yeah, true.
It could be true, but you know, I mean, are you confident he said that?
I'm not really confident in any of it, to be honest. But you know, I've often thought about it. That if he did say that, what was his meaning of saying that? What was he saying? Was he saying that he was resigned to the fact that he was going to be fitted up, or had he already been pre-told by the person or persons unknown that he was maybe due to be meeting there, that was maybe trying to be, you know, had already said to him, you know, sort of pre-calculated, preordained, whatever, that's your rendezvous point. That's where we're going to get you away from, right?
Yeah.
That's your safe destination. Yeah. And they may have said, I've often surmised that they may have said, as part of the plan, that if it all goes wrong, this is what will happen, right? This is what will happen. If it all goes wrong, you will have the FBI and everybody descending upon you, blah, 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 and you will know that things have gone wrong, right? So at that point, he's sitting in the theatre waiting for his rendezvous, whatever, and then all of a sudden he realizes that there's like 40 or 50 police officers and FBI agents and God knows what else. He's going to be thinking, shit, this is it, right? That's what I thought. That's the scenario I've played out in my mind.
The thing that I've wondered about is, I mean, if there were a conspiracy, then, and they were setting up Oswald, surely it would have been better just to have got rid of him before that point, and then they could just have said, we shot him while he was trying to escape. So if that were the case, do you think it's possible that someone was meant to have killed him before that point, and for one reason or another they didn't?
Do you think that someone might have been, or could have been, or should have been Tippit?
Tippit, Ruby, someone else? Marion Baker. I heard Marion Baker in the book depository.
Yeah, it's not something that hasn't crossed my mind before, but I'm just convinced that Oswald, the whole point of Oswald being there was a distraction. Yeah, absolutely.
So you think it was distracting from what's going on back at Parkland or whatever?
Well, yeah, that, but also, it's like, and I'm sure there were lots of tip-offs from coming in all kinds of directions that, Oswald was your man kind of thing. And I think that, a lot of that, if the police's resources are turned towards a suspect, right, then they're not going to look for other suspects. They're not going to look else. They're not going to look elsewhere, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So yeah, that's it. If they've got the guy, then the real killers are making their escape.
Right. Yeah, exactly that. And I've always said that that's what Oswald was. Oswald's part in the whole thing, and I'm sure he was part of the whole thing, or he thought he was part of the whole. I'm sure he was totally aware. That there was going to be an assassination attempt on the president that day. But I think that his role was to deflect away from the actual assassins, not to be fitted up as the assassin. Yeah. That's what I think.
Do you think it's possible that they possibly had some other candidates to be the patsy, and it depended on how events developed? Do you think that's possible?
I do think that, and I've often thought that the hobos. Yeah. I've often thought that they were lined up to be possible patsies as well. And for me, it was all about, if you've got a triangulation of crossfire, and you've got genuine law enforcement guys around the place, and you would have to say that they're not all going to be bloody corrupt, are they? I mean, I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. So I'm assuming that there were some genuine ones there. Now, if you've got a triangulation of crossfire, you've got, bullet noises coming from different directions. Yeah. And it's how they react to what they think is the shot or shots. Yeah. If you know what I mean. So if they, for example, let's, for argument's sake, say they heard a shot come from the overpass. Yeah. Right. Or the railway line. If they thought they'd heard that and they'd have gone in that direction, and the shooter was actually there, then they would have needed a distraction from that area, maybe behind the fence or whatever. Right. So I think there were probably 2 or 3, maybe even more, possible patsies that would have been in that particular area, no matter what. Now, I know that a lot of people did point towards the book depository and whatever, so therefore Oswald then became that guy, Well,
on that point, and I showed you a photo the other day. So you think it's possible that actually the knoll could have been a distraction? Everybody going to the knoll could have been a distraction from not the depository or the depository from the knoll, but actually where is what's the other the opposite place to the grassy knoll? It's the south knoll. So everybody's going over there, and actually if everybody
but human nature is a weird thing, and I think, you know, in times of crisis like that, 9 times out of 10, if you're an innocent bystander, your human nature reaction is normally the right reaction. Normally, I would say.
Yeah.
And most of that crowd, I would have thought, would have been unsuspecting as to what was about to happen.
Yeah.
And the majority of those people immediately ran towards the grassy knoll. Yeah. Now, why would they do that unless they had reason to think that was where the shots come from?
Yeah, or I mean, could they have just been? People said they thought they heard firecrackers. Could they actually have not been real bullets and have been actually firecrackers?
Yeah, they could have been. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they could have been.
I've also read that, you know, people could have been shooting from certain points, actually deliberately missing, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like false flags.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm still convinced in my deepest heart that if and it's a big bloody if shots were fired from that 6th floor, they would have missed.
Yeah. Yeah. I think maybe if it had been a top-notch gunman, he might have got 1, but I don't think he would have got 3 or 4 off it within a couple of seconds. So what we're saying the motive could have been for that Tippit murder, Jace? What do you think the motive could have been?
Well, I think it's, for me, I think the whole thing was, again, set up. I think I've often wondered, because again, I said to you before, for me, it's really murky, and I've often wondered if Tippit wasn't necessarily a genuine police officer. He may have been a plant, or whatever you want to call it, for want of a better phrase, may have been a FBI agent.
A plant, you mean?
Yeah, may have been an FBI agent undercover, or a CIA agent undercover, Secret Service undercover, whatever. But I think that there had to have been a reason for Tippit to have stopped and questioned the suspect. And I think that he was probably under instruction to provoke a situation where he then needed to draw his gun and possibly then take the suspect out. And I just think it went horribly wrong, to be honest. And I think that he ended up getting shot himself. But at that point, they then, as you say, have the perfect excuse to hunt down and arrest Oswald, right? Now, whether Oswald was in fact the same guy that shot Tippit is, again, another whole bucket of conjecture, isn't it?
So, because I think some people have speculated, I think it might even have been some of the witnesses said that it looked like Tippit knew the guy that he spoke to.
Right. Yeah, I'd heard that as well.
And another angle on it, do you think there could be a legal side to this, in that if the police hadn't had a suspect, would LBJ have been able to become the vice president? Because theoretically, he would have been a suspect.
That's a good point. That is a good point. I've never really considered that, but yeah, it's a very good point. It's a very good point.
I mean, whether he did or not, I personally think he had a strong motive. So you know, if they didn't have a suspect, then, you know, people, you know, especially with the shenanigans that were going on back in Washington, you know, maybe people would have looked more at him. You know, they would have considered him more of a suspect.
I don't know whether you agree with me on this, but I would say that in the here and now, in the year 2022, that things have advanced quite a lot since 1963 in terms of, well, A, law enforcement, B, legal stuff, you know, reporting of things. The whole shebang has just moved on, you know, to the point, you know, forensics and all the rest of it is a bit better than what it was in 1963, right? But let's just do a little hypothetical scenario here, right? Let's just say, you know, Biden or Johnson or any you know political leader is assassinated today, right? And do you think that, unless obviously in the same way that, you know, when Sirhan shot Robert Kennedy, he was in the same bloody room, right? Again, there's a lot of conjecture around that, I know, but he was in the same room, so therefore he was arrested immediately, right?
Yeah.
But if you had a situation now where the president or the prime minister or whatever was assassinated, and there wasn't an immediate visual of the shooter, right? Do you think that the whole thing would be done and dusted within 2 hours,
No.
including a new president or a new
absolutely
prime minister?
Well, that,
and, you know, for me, it's just like, what, the whole thing was just planned and orchestrated. It had to be for it to all have happened.
That swearing in is to me, that is like a big,
yeah.
I think to me that's a big hint, in my opinion. Why are you in such a rush to do that? It's almost like he was desperate to be sworn in, because, and like you were saying, actually it wasn't actually necessary, was it? Because he became president by default. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, what, you've only got to look at Watergate, right?
Yeah.
So the minute that Nixon wasn't president,
yeah,
Jerry Ford wasn't sworn in immediately or within 2 hours. It was like days.
Yeah, there was kind of a desperation.
Yeah.
There was a desperation for him to be sworn in. And I guess that's the other thing. I mean, related to the point I made just a minute or two ago about if they didn't have a suspect, then maybe people are going to sort of start looking at Johnson a bit. In the same way, by being sworn in and becoming president, that gives him the power to stymie the investigation.
Yep.
I mean, whereas if he's still vice president, there may have been things that he wouldn't have been able to do that he was able to do when he became president.
Yeah, but like you just said, you know, the minute that Kennedy, the minute he was pronounced dead, Johnson became president by default, and the swearing in thing was just a legality at the end of the day.
But in that legality, is there a difference in the legality about pre-swearing in and post-swearing in? Is there are there some differences in the powers that you have?
No, because he automatically becomes commander in chief automatically.
Right.
And that's a military thing. It's a total military thing. I mean, it applies exactly the same way to the presidents as what it does in the military ranking. If you've got somebody in military rank who gets shot, the person next down in military rank becomes that military rank. It's just the way it is. I mean, the whole swearing in thing is just legalization of it. It's just like, you know, signing a document at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think there's something not quite right about that swearing in. And
I agree. Totally agree. But what I'm saying is, he still had the powers to do all of that other stuff. But like you say, until you're actually physically sworn in with witnesses, and it's all done, in the eyes of God and all that shite that goes with it, right? Any particular point, he is still, like you say, until they arrest somebody for the assassination, he is still technically a suspect, and so is everybody else, including Jackie Kennedy. Everybody's still a suspect.
I just feel that rush to get him sworn in was maybe to prevent any momentum building about suspicions that might have been directed towards him, or maybe even Bobby I think you told me that upon JFK's death, Bobby stopped becoming Attorney General. Is that right? So he lost all his powers. But
that's correct.
If, for example, Lyndon Johnson hadn't been sworn in, maybe there would have been some kind of period where Bobby may still have been, maybe tried to do something.
Well, I think it's significant. It's quite significant that even though, legally, RFK was no longer Attorney General from the minute, Kennedy's heart stopped beating, it's quite significant that Johnson phoned RFK to ask where he should be sworn in. He phoned him to offer his condolences, and then said, and where should I be sworn in? It's like, is that normal? No. Is that normal behavior for a start?
Yeah.
Your brother's just been assassinated, and I'm asking you where I can be sworn in, as though he's talking to him as though he's like the leading legal voice in the country.
Yeah.
When in fact, he wasn't at that particular point, right?
Yeah, but to me, that seems bizarre as well. JFK's just been murdered, and Lyndon Johnson's worried about being president.
Exactly.
I think you can leave it. I think you can leave it for a day or two, don't you? Maybe I'm wrong.
At least, and again, with the whole, moving on a little bit more, with the whole funeral scenario, right? We're talking, what was it, 2 days?
Yeah, I think I'd read 3 days. It could have been 2 days. I think I saw 3 days, but
even so, 2 or 3 days. If it's 3 days, even so, that is a military funeral, a national state funeral, all rolled into one, which requires quite a lot of planning and rehearsal and everything else. You can't just, even Diana's funeral was rehearsed, right? Diana's funeral was a rehearsed funeral that all of the soldiers that took part in that, all the the Queen's Guards and everything, they had rehearsed that plenty of times in the dead of night, right?
Yeah.
But you're not telling me that it wasn't all rehearsed and planned for JFK.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just all a bit.
Yeah, they were in a rush. They were in a rush.
They were in a rush. They were in a rush to get him in the ground. They were in a rush to get him in the ground.
Why were they in a rush? They're trying to cover something up, or they want to get something done.
It's not like it's not like he was of a Muslim faith where they have to do the funerals within, was it 24 hours or something like that. It's like, people lie in state, don't they? People lie in state for like days and days on end. Yeah. He didn't even. I know he wouldn't have been very, presentable and all the rest of it, but you would have thought that they would have put. You would have thought they would have put his coffin, whether he was in it or not is another thing. You would have thought they would have put his coffin on display for people to pay their respects and do all that kind of stuff. No, none of that rubbish. None of it. For goodness sake, even Elvis led in state for days.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so let's just stay with Tippit for a bit. So anyway, we've sort of glossed over the bullets and suspects. We'll have to come back to that. But then, as I said, Tippit's body was whisked away. And I think I'm right in saying it first went to Methodist Hospital. And then, believe it or not, so I don't know why it went to Methodist Hospital. I stand corrected. I could be wrong, but I'm quietly confident I'm right. The body was taken away before anybody could have a good look at it. I mean, it was taken to Methodist Hospital, and then from Methodist Hospital, it was taken to Parkland.
What a surprise.
And I think it was taken to Parkland before JFK's body was removed from Parkland. So why was that? Why did that body first go to Methodist Hospital and then go to Parkland Hospital?
I don't know. I'm just trying to look something up about it. Bear with me a second. Yeah, so obviously I got it wrong. So I need to correct the fact that Sose, when Oswald was arrested, he was carrying a Smith & Wesson handgun, which was used to shoot Tippit, not Tippit's own gun, which I'd read previously. So yeah, Tippit was working his beat, his normal patrol area apparently in Oak Cliff, which is a residential area. So at 12:45, which was only 15 minutes after Kennedy was shot. So, again, we need to know the distance between and, how Oswald, inverted commas, got from the book depository to Oak Cliff. Did he go on foot? Did he go by car? Whatever. Yeah. But yeah, so 15 minutes after Kennedy was shot, Tippit received a radio order to drive to the central Oak Cliff area as part of a concentration of police around the center of the city. All right. At 12:54, Tippit radioed that he had moved as directed, and by then several messages had been broadcast describing a suspect in the shooting at Dealey Plaza as a slender white male in his early 30s, 5'10". It's quite precise, isn't it? 5'10" and weighing about 165 pounds. Also quite precise. And did they have the scales on them at the time? Right.
Well, I mean, who saw that? Who gave that description? I mean, was it Howard Brennan? I mean, where's that description come from?
Exactly. But let's just go back to that. So the description was slender white male, early 30s, 5'10", weighing about 165 pounds. Right. Oswald was a slender white male, 24 years old, 5'9", which is 1 inch difference, and an estimated weight of 150 pounds, right? So at approximately 1:11, 1:14, Tippit was driving slowly eastward on East 10th Street, about 100 feet past the intersection of 10th Street and Patton Avenue, when he pulled alongside a man who resembled the police description. Oswald walked over to Tippit's car and exchanged words with him through an open vent window. Tippit opened his car door, and as Tippit walked towards the front of the car, Oswald drew his handgun and fired 5 shots in rapid succession. 3 bullets hit Tippit in the chest, another in his right temple. 1 bullet missed him altogether. Tippit's body was transported from the scene of the shooting by ambulance to Methodist Hospital, where he was pronounced dead at 1:25 by Dr. Richard Liguri. A short time later, Hardy's shoe store manager, Johnny Brewer, observed Oswald acting suspiciously as police cars passed nearby with sirens blaring. Oswald then ducked into the Texas Theatre without purchasing a ticket. The police were notified by the theatre's cashier and responded by surrounding the theatre. Oswald was arrested after a brief struggle. 12 people who witnessed the shooting or its aftermath were mentioned in the Warren Report. Domingo Benavides saw Tippit standing.
That's the guy. That's the guy. Yeah. Domingo Benavides. He had a brother as well. I think there might have been 2 of them.
Right. So he saw Tippit standing by the left door of his parked police car and a man standing on the right-hand side of the car. He then heard 3 shots. Apparently there were 5 shots, right? He heard 3 shots and saw Tippit fall to the ground. Benavides stopped his pickup truck on the opposite side of the street from Tippit's car. He observed the shooter fleeing the scene and removed 2 spent cartridges from his gun as he left. So why did he only remove 2 if there were 3 shots? Anyway, Benavides waited in his truck until the gunman disappeared, and then a few minutes more before assisting Tippit, he then tried unsuccessfully to use the radio in Tippit's car to report the shooting to police headquarters. Then another unidentified person used the radio in the car and reported the shooting to a police operator for the first time. After that, Ted Calloway, who was Benavides' boss at the used car lot and a former Marine, also used the radio and reported the shooting, hearing in response that the police already knew about it. Calloway testified that he had seen the shooter with the gun in a raised pistol position and shouted at him, but what the shooter responded was unintelligible. Helen Markham witnessed the shooting and then saw a man with a gun in his hand leave the scene. Markham identified Oswald as Tippit's killer in a police lineup she viewed that evening. Barbara Davis and her sister-in-law Virginia Davis heard the shots and saw a man crossing the lawn shaking his revolver as if he were emptying it of cartridge cases. Later, the women found 2 cartridge cases near the crime scene and handed the cases over to police. 2 other cartridge cases were handed to a policeman by Benavides. That evening, Barbara Davis and Virginia Davis were taken to a lineup, and both Davises picked out Oswald as the man who they'd seen. Taxicab driver William Scoggins testified he was sitting nearby in his cab when he saw Tippit's police car pull up alongside a man on the sidewalk. Scoggins heard 3 or 4 shots and then saw Tippit fall to the ground. As Scoggins crouched behind his cab, the man passed within 12 feet of him, pistol in hand, muttering what sounded to him like "poor dumb cop" or "poor damn cop." The next day, Scoggins viewed a police lineup and identified Oswald as the man who he had seen with the pistol. Commission also named several other witnesses who were not at the scene of the murder, but who identified Oswald running between the murder scene and the Texas Theatre, where Oswald was subsequently arrested. And it was a unanimous testimony of expert witnesses before the Warren Commission that these spent cartridge cases were fired from the revolver in Oswald's possession to the exclusion of all other weapons. Out of the 4 bullets recovered from Tippit's body, only 1, according to Nichol, or none, according to Cunningham, could be positively identified as having been fired from Oswald's revolver. The others could have been fired from that revolver, but there was no certain match. When the revolver was test fired by the FBI, it was reported that it was leaving inconsistent microscopic markings on the bullets, i.e. 2 consecutive bullets fired from it could not be matched to each other. This was because the revolver had been rechambered for a .38 special, but not rebarreled for a .38 special, so the bullets were slightly undersized compared to the barrel, making their passage through the barrel erratic. Extensive damage to the bullets was also noted. Later, the HSCA agreed with Cunningham's conclusion that none of the bullets found could be positively identified or ruled out as having been fired from Oswald's revolver. Still, when they test fired the gun, they found that bullets fired from it could actually be matched to each other if they were the same type and manufacturer. There was a discrepancy between the 4 cartridge cases, 2 Western and 2 Remington Peters, and the 4 bullets, 3 Western Winchester and 1 Remington Peters found. One of the proposed explanations was that Oswald fired 5 shots and 1 bullet and 1 cartridge case were not found. Upon his arrest and during subsequent questionings by police, Oswald denied any involvement in Tippit's murder. Based on eyewitness statements and the gun found in Oswald's possession at the time of his arrest, he was formally charged with the murder of J.D. Tippit at 7:10 p.m. on November the 22nd. During the course of the day, police began to suspect that Oswald was also involved in the shooting of Kennedy. At approximately 1 a.m. on November the 23rd, Oswald was also charged with assassinating President John F. Kennedy. Oswald continued to maintain his innocence in connection with both murders. In the late morning of November the 24th, while being transported from the Dallas City Jail, Oswald was fatally shot in the abdomen by nightclub owner Jack Ruby. The shooting was broadcast throughout the United States and Canada on live television. As Oswald was killed before he was tried for either crime, President Lyndon Johnson commissioned a committee of US senators, congressmen, and elder statesmen to investigate the events surrounding the deaths of Kennedy, Tippit, and Oswald in an effort to answer questions regarding the events. President Johnson also hoped to quell rumours that arose after Oswald was shot by Jack Ruby that the assassination and subsequent shootings were part of a conspiracy.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a bit of a lopsided version. So I think there, for example, with when the identification at the identity parade, I think he was disheveled because he'd been getting some rough treatment from the police officers, and the police officers included themselves in the ID parade. So it was pretty obvious who the, so who the odd one out was in the ID parade and so on. So I don't think it's as clear cut as it's been described there, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So
just messy, isn't it? It's just completely messy.
Well, basically, I wouldn't trust those police officers as far as I could throw them, to be honest. You know.
No.
So anyway, suddenly Oswald has appeared on the scene. So we've almost got like a world record clean cut case, you know, so like you were saying, it's all tied up within a few hours. I mean, even in clear cut cases, like you were saying, these days, it still takes, we're probably talking months and months to get it all to court and all that. And here they've got it all wrapped up within a few hours. I mean, we're talking about the President of the United States. So even though I know you said he lost all his powers, but do you think Bobby could have handled it any differently, or what were the reasons for going along with the official account?
Just putting something out there. Have you ever considered that Bobby was a suspect?
No, I hadn't, but I mean, I don't think he was involved myself, but I mean, everybody's, like you were saying before, everybody's a suspect. But.
Well, I've often wondered if he was a suspect and what his motive could have been. And you've got to throw Marilyn Monroe into the mix, right?
Yeah. I mean, as I said, Ken O'Donnell, I've also heard that Ken O'Donnell was going to be losing his job, and if you look at that Willis photo, he looks a bit on edge, and just as they're coming down Elm, he's scouring the picket fence areas. So everybody else is relaxed, but he's not relaxed when you look at that photo. Yeah, I mean, yeah, everybody's a suspect until they've been eliminated. Yeah.
I've often wondered. I mean, I know it's kind of deviating a little bit, but I've often wondered that. Obviously, you know, Robert Kennedy had intentions on presidency at some point, and I know it was like, you know, sort of 5 years later or whatever. But I often wondered why Jack Kennedy appointed Bobby as Attorney General and didn't have him as his vice president. Because if he'd had him as vice president, you know, upon the, you know, the worst happening, which is what happened in the end, you would have still had a Kennedy in the White House.
Yeah.
I just never really understood why he wasn't his vice president. And, you know, having said that, I suppose as Attorney General, he wouldn't have had any reason to be in Dallas, but I would have thought, I don't know what I would have thought, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just absolutely nothing. You know, I mean, yeah, personally, yeah, as I said, you can't discount anything, but
I know that. Well, I say I know. I've read, obviously, and heard that Robert Kennedy was completely and utterly infatuated with Marilyn Monroe, but he was also well aware that she was completely and utterly infatuated with his brother. So, you know, blokes do strange things over the passions of women, don't
they? Yeah. I personally just don't think he was involved in the assassination, but I do.
But he did have a motive. He did.
Oh yeah. He had the motive, but
And he was never questioned about it, was he?
no. But I do have to say how I think by doing nothing, you could almost equate it to what's happening now, what we've been talking about with Putin and the reaction to what he's doing in Ukraine by being passive or appearing to be passive in response. It's almost like he brought about his own death, in my opinion. I think he would have been better coming out all guns blazing, in my opinion. If you put yourself in his position, would you have been so passive or?
No, not at all. I would have moved heaven and earth to well, certainly. I mean, I know. Again, we can argue was he or wasn't he the Attorney General at the time, but I would have thought he would still have had enough clout and influence over or alongside whoever was then the Attorney General to, really sort of turn over every stone possible. Yeah,
I think he still served. I think he still served as I think Johnson kept him on, did he? So he kept him on for 3 years or something.
What, as Attorney General?
I think so. But
I didn't know that.
But wouldn't I think by not doing anything, maybe the people who got away with it, presuming that there were conspirators, were emboldened by having got away with it, in my opinion.
And I absolutely think that still remains to this day. That those those have survived, that have not already, departed, because it was like 50 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm convinced that they're still emboldened by it.
That's why I think it's still relevant today, because a lot of what's going on these days is actually, you can trace it back to that day, in my opinion.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, there are so many comparisons that you can draw with the Cuban crisis, with this crisis that's currently going on. But there doesn't seem to be anybody with the kind of backbone, which is ironic because he had a really bad backbone of JFK, that would stand up to Putin in the way that he stood up to Castro. There doesn't seem to be anybody with that kind of clout in the world at the moment. Okay,
so where were we? So Oswald's come into it. He's been arrested at the theatre. Just going back to the Tippit body, I'm not very happy about that count. That seems a bit one-sided about the Tippit murder, in my opinion. But it didn't mention about, I'm pretty sure, yes, the body first went to the Methodist hospital, but I think that after that, it then was transferred to the Parkland Hospital. So why was it transferred to the Parkland Hospital if it was?
Yeah, I'd heard that as well. I also heard that Oswald's body was as well.
Oh, really? Yeah, I think that might be right. But I mean, of course, the Oswald body is 2 days later. The Tippit body is getting transferred there while Kennedy's corpse is still there.
But I'd heard that Oswald's body and Tippit's body were both at Parkland at the same time.
Oh, really?
I don't know whether that's true. I'd read that before. But.
Okay. So anyway, Tippit's dead. He's at Methodist hospital. His body's been removed. Possibly gone to Parkland, and then we've got Oswald getting arrested at 1:51, I think it is, and then he gets charged with the murder of Tippit 7:10, was it, in the evening? And they were also, was he charged with the Kennedy murder, or they were just looking into it?
No, 7:10 he was charged with Tippit, I think.
Yeah. What about the Kennedy? Was he charged with that, or they were just looking? I don't think he was charged with it, was it? They were just looking into it.
What, Tippit?
No, into the Kennedy murder.
Yeah, no, he wasn't charged with Kennedy until where was it? So he was charged with the murder of Tippit at 7:10, and it was 1 a.m. in the morning on the November the 23rd that he was charged with assassination of Kennedy.
Okay, so so let's just forget about the Oswald in Oswald custody for a moment and just get back to the Kennedy body. So, as you said, there must have been a bit of a cleanup job. They looked at the body at Parkland, couldn't revive him, of course, and then he was declared dead. And then they've got to remove the body back to Love Field, which you reckon took about 20 to 30 minutes. So there was a period, I'm guessing there was a period where the body was waiting to be taken back. So I haven't seen the movie Parkland, so I think Natalie Portman's in that. She plays Jackie Kennedy. Have you seen that, Jace?
Yeah, yeah, I have. Yeah.
So, so I think
it's Natalie Portman. Natalie Portman played Jackie and Jackie.
All right, Jack. Maybe that's. Oh, so yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. So she played Jackie Kennedy in a movie, didn't she? So.
Yeah, called Jackie. Yeah.
Right.
Parkland is another.
Right. Okay. Okay. But in Jackie, isn't there a scene where they're in Parkland Hospital? Is that right?
Yeah. So,
but I've read, I don't know what is true, but I've also read that during the time that JFK was at Parkland, there was a period where his body was alone with Kellerman and Greer for a period.
Yeah.
So I don't.
That's also quite clear in the latest Oliver Stone thing as well.
Oh, really? So I don't know. Can you shed some light on that? I don't know a lot about that.
Not any more than what you just said, really. There was a period of time where they were alone with him. At which point, anything could happen, couldn't it?
So what was that in? Was that in the operating theatre or some side room? Where was it? Do you know?
No, I just know that it was in the hospital. I don't know specifically which room.
And I'm just wondering about that. Did they must have had blood on their clothes? Did they have blood on their clothes and all that? Do you know?
I don't know. I know that obviously Jackie did. I know that. I think the guy that went into the press briefing,
Malcolm Kilduff.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he had blood on his sleeve. I think when he lit up his cigarette and his hand was shaking, you could see the blood on his sleeve. Yeah.
Yeah. So as I said, because some people speculate, I'm not saying it's true, but some people have speculated that Kellerman and Greer might have done something when they were alone with the body.
Yeah. Well, again,
and also,
anything could happen.
And also, as I said, I'm pretty sure before they all went back to Love Field that I've read that Tippit's body arrived at Parkland before they left. So I'm not sure. That's something we need to check up on. Yeah.
Yeah. That would have been quite something, really.
Okay, so let's go back then. So we're heading back to Love Field now. So they've gone back, and Johnson's been making phone calls here, there, and everywhere by the sounds of it. And he's worried about getting sworn in as president. So to me, that sounds a bit unusual. What do you reckon about that? Do you think that's strange or just normal?
No, I think it's completely strange. I also think it's really bloody weird that you know, he's got Jackie by his side. She's still drenched in the blood of
Yeah.
right, because that was, she insisted because they wanted her to change, and she insisted because she wanted the whole world to see, you know, what they'd done to him, and that was the best way she could do that. But I do remember watching the swearing in and looking at her face, and she's obviously completely, you know, detached from that situation because of, you know, what's going on, and you can totally understand that. But what I didn't understand was the way that Lady Bird Johnson then, you know, gave a little cheer and applauded. Like, bloody hell.
I didn't know about cheer and applause, but
did a little yay kind of thing, and then a little burst of applause.
wow, that's horrible.
Jackie stood right there, you know.
Yeah, it's horrible. Also, I can't see it myself, but there's that, maybe it's the same photo, and I think, is it Senator Thomas? Is it Harold Thomas or something? And he's in the plane there as well, and they say he was winking, but
yeah.
But to me, it's just a photograph. I cannot see the wink myself, which is not to say it's not there, but
there is movie footage of it.
All right, so I've only seen the still photo, so but I can't see the wink myself. But
there is movie footage of it.
But
yeah, it's, to me, it all doesn't sit right. I mean, the fact that, yeah, there's a bit of a murky area again with that, in as much as some say that the swearing in actually took place when the plane was airborne, and others say that it didn't. I personally don't think it happened while it was airborne, because the judge from Dallas that did the swearing in, Sarah, whatever her name was, would have still been on the plane at that point.
she presumably got off the plane then, did she?
Apparently, yeah.
The thing is about that Sarah Hughes, she was sort of had business connections with the Johnsons.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. But the thing with the swearing in thing, if apparently if the swearing in happens in the air, it's not legally binding, because you're not actually being sworn in a particular state, even though you're in airspace above that state. It's not legally binding. So it would to be legally binding, it would have to be done on the ground at love field.
Also, would it make any difference which state you were in? I mean, would it make
yeah, it would, because each state has got different state law. Even though there's like a law of the land, which all of the states have to, adhere to, each particular state has state law. Yeah.
So if he'd not got sworn in, presuming he did get sworn in Texas and instead got sworn in back in Washington, that could have made a difference in any lawsuit or his
Possibly. I don't know. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I'm not sure. I think more of it is to do with like who actually does the sort of the witnessing and the signing in. They've got to be residents of that particular state and blah 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 blah. It's all.
It seems to me that they were in a rush to get it done.
Yeah, of course they were.
So okay, so of course the body apparently is on the plane as well. The car, the limousine is on. Is the limousine's on that plane, or is it on the vice president's plane? But I think that was going back. Or did that follow later in another plane? I don't know. But the body's going back to Washington. The plane's going back to Washington. They're like two of the most important bits of evidence. And the body is getting messed around with immediately the same day. The car is also getting messed around the same. Like the two biggest bits of evidence, and they're getting interfered with, worked on almost immediately. So, so the body
Thank you.
apparently has been
Thank you.
taken back to the plane. So I don't know whether it's getting off or getting on the plane, getting off the plane in Washington or getting on the plane in Dallas. I think you were telling me about how the coffin was vertical or something. Is that right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Can you tell us?
Something
Can you tell us about that?
almost vertical when they were trying to get on the plane in the first place. Basically, they were struggling with it because obviously, you know, those things are heavy. I know, I've carried one, right? And I would imagine that the casket that the president was in was probably, you know, lead lined and all that rubbish. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have fancied carrying a coffin up the steps of an aircraft. I mean, coffins are meant to go in the hole. Jackie was like not having any of that. She wanted her husband to be, you know, in the actual sort of the carriage area, if you like. And she was insistent on it. And apparently it was just Jackie that was insistent on it. The others were like a bit indifferent. They wanted like just get it on the plane, you know. But it was Jackie that was pushing for that. And then I think it was actually Lady Bird that said yes, she should have what she wants. And then in order to get the coffin onto the plane and to be able to turn, and they had to remove some of the structure of the actual aircraft to do it. I mean, Jesus, you know, unbelievable. I mean, the coffin's like that going up the steps. You know, it's not vertical, but it's like that. You know, so you know the contents are not going to be too taken care of, if indeed there were any contents. You know, and then again, getting off the plane at Washington, coming down the steps like that. You know. You can't keep it level coming down the steps. It's impossible.
Okay, so Lyndon Johnson's being sworn in as president. I mean, JFK had arrived just 3 hours earlier. 3 hours later, LBJ's president.
Yeah, he's not even cold, is he?
So there seems to be, in my opinion, a large amount of disrespect going on here. What do you reckon about that?
Loads of disrespect. Yeah, loads, absolutely loads. I mean, I think the establishment were actually quite relieved by the fact that he'd been got rid of.
Oh yeah, I think they were exultant. So
yeah, exultant is the word. Yeah.
Just behaviour though of the Johnson seems incredibly callous. Well, everybody on that plane, it appears to me. So yeah, you were saying about Jackie had insisted that the body would be in the cabin, but I was reading that the captain had some say in that, or
say again.
I'd heard that I saw the captain of the pilot of the plane, Air Force One, saying that I thought he'd had some influence on the body being in the cabin. Maybe I'm wrong in that respect.
No, I mean, again, it's like everything. There are so many different reports. You might have read one different to what I've read. So, you know, it doesn't mean either one of us is necessarily right.
The other thing about that is, so also I saw some people saying that actually LBJ should have gone back to Washington in Air Force Two because he had the vice president's plane and not gone in Air Force One.
Yeah, but technically he wasn't the vice president. Technically.
Well, he wasn't. Yeah.
He's acting president if he's not sworn in.
Yeah.
And he's sworn in, he's president. So, yeah, I mean, given the urgency that he wanted to get sworn in by, he's not going to be opting to go on Air Force Two, is he? No. That's what I'm saying. He's going to be like chomping at the bit to get on bloody Air Force One, you know. And apparently, and this was in the was it in the Oliver Stone? It was definitely in a documentary that I watched the other night. Jackie went into the actual sort of office where the president would sit on the plane, right?
Yeah.
Or the desk or whatever.
Yeah.
And Johnson was there with his feet up on the desk. And Jackie went ballistic, apparently.
Yeah, well, I think he was apparently he was a nasty piece of work, Johnson.
Yeah, but to do that, you know, I mean, gee, I wouldn't. Any self-respecting geezer would not have even sat at that desk that day, let alone sit there, lean back with your shirt sleeves rolled up and your feet on the desk, which is how she found him.
Yeah,
she went into that room.
Yeah, we'll get on to Johnson another time because he was a nasty character, basically. So
yeah, and Lady Bird was not too pleasant either.
Yeah, I heard that. I heard she was actually worse than her husband, which
bit of a driving force for her, I feel.
Yeah. So anyway, so they're in Dallas. I don't know. Well, the feet up on the table aside, I'm not sure what else went on, and so the plane's going back.
There was also champagne popped as well after the signing in. One of Johnson's aides cracked open a bottle of champagne, which he got from Jack Kennedy's personal fridge on the plane.
She must have felt so alone on that, as Bobby wasn't on there, and she must have felt so alone.
Yeah, and she sat literally with the coffin the whole flight, with her hand on the coffin, apparently.
But was the coffin open or was it closed?
Closed.
So we don't know what's inside the coffin.
But then, you know, I've also read other accounts that, you know, there's this whole sort of like image of, you know, Jackie as the grieving widow. But don't forget, she had to put up with a lot of Jack Kennedy's philandering and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, you know, just what you see is not necessarily always what it is it?
Yeah. Okay, so the plane's taken off at 3:40, was it 3:48 or something?
Something like that, yeah.
And then I don't know how many hours it takes to get back to Washington. I think it got back around 7 o'clock, 6:30 maybe. I don't know whether there's a time difference between Texas and Washington. I think they're pretty similar, if not the same.
Yeah. So it arrived back in Washington apparently 10 minutes before Oswald was charged with Tippit's murder.
So he's charged with Tippit's murder at 7:10. So they got back at 7 o'clock. So, and it was dark. That's the other thing. It was dark when it arrived back at Washington.
Yeah. What's November?
Yeah. But I'm just saying, for something we could talk about maybe next time, being dark might have also come into play with what went on when the plane landed. So as regards what was going on the other side of the plane, perhaps. So so let's just stay in Dallas. So they've arrested Oswald, and he's going to be in custody for the next few days, and it's going to be another 4.5 hours before he's charged. So
no, he's already been charged. He's already been charged with one murder.
But yeah, when the plane's taken off at 2:48 or whatever, so 4 hours after that, it's
he's clearly had a beating because he maintains a black eye at some stage in that period.
And the other thing about that was, in that, I don't know whether it was before he was charged, but there are a few unusual things about that, in that he tried to make a few phone calls. So one phone call was to somewhere up in Carolina. Some people may think it had a CIA, was possibly a CIA or intelligent, and anyway, an intelligence number, possibly ONI, an ONI number. And then there's the other call, the 30-minute call. He spoke to somebody for 30 minutes, but we don't know what he talked about in that 30 minutes, unless you know. But I don't think anybody knows who he talked to or what he said in that 30 minutes. And as you say, he was beat up. But the other thing that I think is unusual, and we can finish on this point, Jace, is that if he's getting interviewed, who do you think would be in that room?
What, interviewed by the police, you mean?
Yeah. So if he's getting interrogated, who's going to be in that room?
Well, he should have a lawyer for a start.
Yes, which he didn't have. And who else? The police.
I don't know.
Or the police. The police. And I think the FBI guy. I think there are a couple of FBI guys there. And I'm not sure at this point, but at some stage, there was the postmaster was in there. But the post office. The boss of the post office was in there.
What was he in there for?
Exactly. So what's he doing in there? But the post office is in Dealey Plaza. So I think, so on the north side, you had the Texas School Book Depository, Daltex, County Court Building. Then if you go down, is it onto Commerce Street? I think that was that where the post office was? I think.
So
I'm pretty sure the postmaster was there. So why would he be there?
Unless he was wiring telegrams of what was being said all over the place. Why would you be in there?
Or he had intelligence. He was also worked for intelligence.
I didn't know that.
Okay, unless there's anything else you want to say, shall we finish there, Jace?
Yeah, good one to finish on that.
Okay, thanks.